to the Children's and Teen Services Adult Title Talk for Winter Spring 2022. My name is Ray Paskiewicz. I'm the senior buyer of children's fiction at Baker and Taylor. I've been here about 10 years now, and I will be taking you today through Winter Spring 2022 for most of our major publishers and the books that are of particular interest to both Baker and Taylor and myself, as well as some of the greatest or biggest titles, I should say, that will circulate for this winter-spring season. First up, we have big titles or anticipated next books. This we begin with some key titles by noteworthy authors returning with new projects. These are titles that should have some of the largest circulations as they are true fan favorites with a very loyal following. Here, we have some favorite authors with new endeavors and some big circulation to come. First up is The Horsewoman by James Patterson and Mike Lupica. A mother and daughter compete for the same spot on an Olympic equestrian team. This is out in January, and this should be a very large title and the first time that James Patterson has paired with Mike Lupica, a favorite of the library crowd. Next up, we have Janet Ivanovich, The Recovery Agent. This comes out in March and is a brand new series with a new character, Gabriella Rose, from Janet Ivanovich. Think of a cross between Lara Croft and Indiana Jones. She recovers lost heirlooms for very wealthy clients. And lastly here, we have another James Patterson pairing, Run, Rose, Run by Dolly Parton and James Patterson. This is a young singer-songwriter on the rise and on the run, out in March as well. And this is a very large book for both James Patterson's flagship name and Dolly Parton joining together for the first time. The next slide, we have some of the biggest titles of the season. All should be very familiar to all of you. And these are some of the biggest circulations and the biggest books of the winter-spring 2022 season. Of noteworthy here is French Braid by Ann Tyler, due out in March. Also March, a new Danielle Steele High Stakes. I bring this particular one to highlight because it is a group of 5 women in the business world. We have a new Lucy Foley, The Paris Apartment, coming in February. That's the next thriller whodunit from the best-selling author. Diablo Mesa, Douglas Preston and Lincoln Child's next one. The Lightning Rod, the next Zig and Nola novel from Brad Meltzer. The Match by Harlan Coben, which is a return to the woods and the characters of Wild from his novel The Boy from the Woods. Abandoned in Death, the next Eve Dallas novel from J.D. Robb. What Happens to the Bennetts? Lisa Scottolini returning to the family drama that she's most noted for. A new trilogy from Don Winslow, City on Fire, coming in April. Book of Night, a modern dark fantasy, and her adult debut from Hawley Black, that you'll know from the young adult world. Razzmatazz, Christopher Moore's return to the Madcap sequel to Noir. And The Serpent's Eye, the last Clive Cussler with Robin Bursell, and this is the newest Sam and Remy Fargo adventure. This has now been moved out to July. And the last book in this presentation, or the newest. Next up, we have some priority titles that I know will circulate that I want to make you all aware of. These are key titles by noteworthy authors who are returning with new books, as well as some of the most anticipated debut authors to watch. Both categories here are primed for breakout success this coming season, and the debuts have already have had wildly anticipated buzz, and Baker and Taylor has taken an early interest in and has sparked great early anticipated demand with these particular titles. First up, Noah Hawley. It's the first big book of 2022. This is an epic literary thriller set where America is right now, in which a band of unlikely heroes sets out on a quest to save one innocent life and might wind up saving all of us. You might remember Noah Hawley from his breakout bestseller, the pulse racing thriller Before the Fall from 2017. Wheels are coming off in America, the opioid addictions accelerate unstoppably, and environmental collapse can be read in every weather report. Vigilante bands take over the streets at night wearing clown face makeup. Think the Purge movies. And the very idea of government and citizenship are challenged daily. And something is happening to teenagers across the country, and they're spreading through memes that only they can understand. Noah Hawley's new novel is a freewheeling adventure that finds light in dark corners, unforgettably vivid characters, and a plot as fast and as bright as a pop cinema blend in a Vonnegut story that is as timeless as a Grimm's fairy tale. It is a leap into the idiosyncratic pulse of the American heart, written with bravado, literary power, and feverish foresight that has made Hawley one of our most essential writers. This has strong literary writing style married to a part thriller, part dystopian plot, and it is one you don't want to miss and sure to get your heart racing. Next up, we have one of the most anticipated novels of the entire winter-spring season. This is from one of our most celebrated writers of our time and a literary figure with a cult status. This is a sibling novel to her Pulitzer Prize and National Book Critics Award-winning A Visit from the Goon Squad, The Candy House by Jennifer Egan. Here is an electrifying, deeply moving novel about the quest for authenticity and the meaning in a world where memories and identities are no longer private. The Candy House opens with the brilliant Bix Bixton, whose company's Madala is so successful that he is one of those tech demigods with whom we're all on a first-name basis. Think Elon Musk. Bix is 40 with 4 kids, restless, desperate for a new idea, when he stumbles into a conversation group mostly of Colombian professors, one of whom is experimenting with downloading and externalizing your memory. It's 2010, and within a decade, Bix's new technology, your own unconscious, allows you to access every memory that you've ever had and to share every memory in exchange for access to the memories of others. And this has seduced millions, but not everyone. In the spellbinding, interlocking narratives, Egan spins out the consequences of your own consciousness through the lives of multiple characters whose paths intersect over several decades. Intellectually dazzling, The Candy House is also an extraordinarily moving novel, a testament to the tenacity and the transcendence of the human longing for a real connection, love, family, privacy, and redemption. In the world of Egan's spectacular imagination, there are counters who track and exploit the desires, and there are eluders who understand the price of taking a bite from this candy house. Egan introduces these characters in an astonishing array of narrative styles, from the omnipresent to first person to plural to a duet of voices. Chapter and chapters of tweets scroll by. If the Goon Squad wasn't organized like a concept album, which Egan tends to write almost like a symphonic symphony, The Candy House incorporates electronic dance music more as a disjunctive approach. The parts are titled Build, Break, Drop, and with an emphasis on gaming, portals, and alternate worlds. It's a structure that also suggests the experiment of moving along in dimensions like a role-playing game. The Candy House is a bold and brilliant imagining of a world that is moments away. Egan takes to stunning new heights with her deeply intuitive forays into the darker aspects of our technology-driven, image-saturated culture. And The Candy House delivers an absolutely extraordinary combination of fierce, exhilarating, intelligent, and heart in its writing. The back orders through Baker and Taylor on this particular title are building to great numbers already. Next up is Mercy Street by Jennifer Haig, coming out in February. The highly anticipated new novel by the acclaimed New York Times bestselling author Jennifer Haig, who the Washington Post calls a gifted chronicler of the human condition. This is a tense, riveting story about the desperate lives that intersect at a women's clinic in Boston. For almost a decade, Claudia has counseled patients at Mercy Street, a clinic in the heart of the city. The work is consuming, the unending dramas of women in crisis. But for its patients, Mercy Street offers more than a health care. For many, it's a second chance. But outside the clinic, the reality is very different. Anonymous threats are frequent, and a small, determined group of anti abortion demonstrators appears each morning at its door. As the protests intensify, fear creeps into Claudia's days, and anxiety that she manages with frequent visits to a friend Timmy, an affable but shady pot dealer in the midst of his own existential crisis. At Timmy's, she encounters a random assortment of customers, including Anthony, a lost soul who spends most of his life online, chatting with the mysterious Excelsior number 11, the screen name of Victor Prine, who actually happens to be an anti-abortion crusader who has his sights set on Mercy Street and is ready to risk it all for his beliefs. Mercy Street, at its heart, is a novel for right now, a story of the polarizing American present. Jennifer Haig, an expert natural storyteller with a keen sense of her character's humanity, has written a groundbreaking novel, a fearless examination of one of the most decisive issues in our time, and a thriller for this moment. Next, we have the second most anticipated book of the entire winter-spring season, Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel. The award-winning best-selling author of Station 11 and The Glass Hotel returns with a novel of art, time, love, and the plague that takes readers from a Vancouver island in 1912 to a dark colony on the moon 300 years later, unfurling a story of humanity across centuries and space. Edwin St. Andrew is 18 years old when he crosses the Atlantic by steamship, exiled from a polite society following an ill-conceived diatribe at a dinner party. He enters the forest and is spellbound by the beauty of the Canadian wilderness, and suddenly hears the notes of a violin echoing in an airship terminal, an experience that shocks him to his core. 2 centuries later, a famous writer is on a book tour. She's traveling all over the earth, but her home is the second moon colony, a place of the white stone-spired towers and artificial beauty. Within the text of this best-selling pandemic novel lies a strange passage. A man plays his violin for a change in the echoing corridor of an airship terminal as the trees of a forest rise around him. How did she know to write this? And lastly, when a detective in a black-skied night city is hired to investigate an anomaly in the Northern American wilderness, he uncovers a series of 5 lives upended. The exiled son of an earl driven to madness, a writer trapped far from home as a pandemic rages on Earth, and a childhood friend from the night city who, like himself, has glimpsed the chance to do something extraordinary that will disrupt this timeline of the universe. This is a virtuoso novel that has that this is a virtuoso novel that is as human and tender as it is intelligently inventive. Sea of Tranquility is a novel of time travel and of metaphysics that captures the reality of our current moment in time from a very unique and singular voice in literary fiction. Fans of Mandel will not be disappointed in this next highly, highly original novel. Now we're going to take a short trip to Europe, Italy, and then France to be specific for our next few titles. The New York Times bestselling author of the heartwarming, heartbreaking, and hard to put down modern classic, In 5 Years, returns with a moving and unforgettable exploration of the powerful bond between mother and daughter set on the breathtaking Amalfi Coast. When Katie's mother dies, she is left reeling. Carol just wasn't Katie's mom, but her best friend and her first phone call. She had all the answers, and now when Katie needs her most, she is gone. To make matters worse, their planned mother and daughter trip of a lifetime looms. 2 weeks in the Postano, the magical town where Carol spent the summer right before she met Caddy's father. Caddy has been waiting years for Carol to take her, and now she is faced with embarking on this adventure alone. But as soon as she sets foot on the Amalfi Coast, Katie begins to feel her mother's spirit, and buoyed by the stunning waters, the beautiful cliffsides, delightful residents, and of course the delectable food, Katie feels herself coming back to life. And then Carol, her mother, appears in the flesh, healthy, sun tanned, and 30 years old. Katie doesn't understand what is happening or how. All she could do is focus on that she somehow, impossibly, has gotten her mother back. Over the course of one Italian summer, Katie gets to know Carol, not as her mother, but as the young woman before her. She is not exactly who Katie imagines she might be, and however soon Katie must reconcile the mother who knew everything with this young woman who does not yet have a clue. Rebecca Seal's next great novel and love story is here, and this time it's between a mother and a daughter. With her signature heartbreaking, redemptive, and authentic prose, Miss Searle has crafted a transcendent novel about how we move on after loss and how the people we love never truly leave us. From Adriana Trigiani, a, that the New York Post calls a master of visual and palpable delight, comes a lush and immersive novel about a hardworking family of the Tuscan artisans who have long held secrets. This is epic in scope with resplendent themes of identity and longing. The Good Left Undone will unfold in breathtaking narrative coming out in April. Medellina, the Caballari family matriarch, has always been hard and opinionated, and now as she faces the end of her life, she is determined to leave no stone unturned, including her mother's own revelations about her two great loves, her childhood friend, Savallo, and proud Scottish sea captain, John Laurie McEvers, the father Medellina has never known. In Days of the Past, Dominica Caballari thrives in the coastal town until the day of her beloved home has become unsafe as Italy teeters on the brink of World War II. As her journey takes her from the rocky shores of Marseille to the mystical beauty of Scotland to the dangers of wartime Liverpool, where Italian Scots are imprisoned without cause, Dominica experiences love, loss, grief as she longs for home. 100 years later, her daughter, Medellina, the great granddaughter, Alina, and her great granddaughter, Alina, face the same big questions about life and their family's legacy as Medellina contemplates what is worth fighting for and when to let go. But Medellina is running out of time, and the two timelines here are about to intersect and weave together in very unexpected ways. This is a very atmospheric novel full of both humor and deeply felt writing, and this is a novel that will expand Adriana Trigiani's fan base much, much further. Next, we have the dramatic story of how a humble bookseller fought against incredible odds to bring one of the most important books of the 20th century to the world in this new novel from Carrie Mayer, author of The Girl in the White Gloves. The Paris Bookseller, coming out in January. When bookish young American Sylvia Beach opened Shakespeare and Company on a quiet street in Paris in 1919, she has no idea that her new bookstore will change the course of literature itself. Shakespeare and Company is more than a bookstore and a lending library. Many of the prominent writers of the lost generation, like Ernest Hemingway, consider it a second home. It's where some of the most important literary friendships of the 20th century are forged, and none more so than between the Irish writer James Joyce and Sylvia herself. When Joyce's controversial novel Ulysses is banned, Beach takes a massive risk and publishes it under the auspices of Shakespeare and Company itself. But the success and notoriety of the publishing the most infamous and influential book of the century comes with very steep costs. The future of her beloved store itself is threatened when Ulysses' success brings other publishers to woo Joyce away, and her most cherished relationships are put to the test as Paris is plunged deeper into the Depression and many friends return to America. As she faces painful personal and financial crisis, Sylvia, a woman who has made her mission to honor a life-changing impact that books have, must decide what Shakespeare and Company is all about. And their history and their origins are usually immediate bestsellers and circulate. This is one of the most important stories about one of the most widely read novels and most beloved bookstores in the world, and one that not many are fully aware of. This is for book lovers and bibliophiles everywhere. It's an interesting twist on historic fiction with a nonfiction slant. Next, we're going to discover some breakout debuts for the winter-spring 2022 season. Up in these titles, we'll have books on diversity, great storytelling, and the next fan favorites. First up is one of my favorites, and it's the really first big debut of this year. This is a heart-stopping thriller debut to watch out for this coming season. It has been called meticulously crafted and deeply satisfying, and a first-class political thriller by Charlotte Philby, whose author part of the family. Greenwich Park by Catherine Faulkner, coming out on January 4th. It's a twisty, whip-smart debut thriller, as electrifying as the #1 New York best-selling title, The Girl on the Train, about an impending motherhood and an unreliable friendship with the high costs or prices of keeping people's secrets. Think Women in the Window with this book, the kind of book you don't want to put down and will keep you guessing until the very, very end, with an unsuspecting plot twist that the clues are hidden in very plain sight. Helen's idyllic life, handsome architect husband, gorgeous Victorian house, and cherished baby are all on the way after years of trying. She begins to change the day she attends her first prenatal class and meets Rachel, an unpredictable single mother-to-be. Rachel doesn't seem very maternal. She smokes, drinks, and professes little interest in parenthood. Still, Helen is drawn to her. Maybe Rachel just needs a friend. And to be honest, Helen's a bit lonely herself. At least Rachel is fun to be with. She makes Helen laugh and invites her confidences and distracts her from her fears. But her increasing erratic behavior is very unsettling, and Helen is not the only one who is now noticing it. Her friends and family begin to suspect that her new strange friend may be linked to their shared history in very unexpected ways. When Rachel threatens to expose a past crime that could destroy all their lives, it becomes clear that there are more than a few secrets laying beneath the broad-leaved trees and warm lamplight of Greenwich Park. This debut is one to read, and I highly recommend, especially in the ever-popular thriller genre. It's perfect for that cold weather when you just want a good book to keep you up reading late into the night. This is that book. Next, we have Carolina Built by Kariana Alexander. It's a vivid and moving novel based on the incredible life of real-life real estate magnate Josephine N. Leary, a previously untold story of passion, perseverance, and building a legacy after the emancipation in North Carolina. Josephine N. Leary is determined to build a life of her own and a future for her family. When she moves to Eatontown, North Carolina, from the plantation where she was born, she is free, newly married, and ready to follow her dreams. As the demands of life pull Josephine's attention, deepening her marriage, caring for her daughters, supporting her grandmother, She struggles to balance her real estate aspirations with realities of keeping life going every day. She teaches herself to become a businesswoman, to manage her finances, and to make smart investments in the local real estate market. But with each passing year, it grows more and more difficult to focus on building her legacy from this ground up. Moving and inspiring, Joseph Leary's untold story speaks to the part of us that dares to dream bigger and tear down whatever stands in our way. This is to build something better for the loved ones that we now leave behind. Next is Memphis by Tara M. Stringfellow. This is a spellbinding debut novel tracing three generations of a Southern black family and one daughter's discovery that she has the power to change her family's legacy. It's summer 1995. 10-year-old Joan, her mother, her younger sister flee her father's explosive temper and seek refuge in her mother's ancestral home of Memphis. It is not the first time violence has altered the course of this family's trajectory. Half a century earlier, Joan's grandfather built this majestic house in the historic black neighborhood of Douglas, only to be lynched days after becoming the first black detective in this city. Joan tries to settle into her new life, but family secrets cast a longer shadow than ever of them expected. As she grows up, Joan finds relief in her artwork, painting portraits of the community in Memphis. One of her subjects is her enigmatic neighbor, Miss Dawn, who claims to know something about curses, and whose stories about the past help Joan see how her own passion, imagination, and relentless hope are in fact a continuation of a long matriarchal tradition. Joan begins to understand that her mother, and her mother's mother, and her mothers before them have persevered and have made impossible choices, and they have put their own dreams on hold so that her life could not have been defined by that loss and anger. And it's the sole instrument she needs for healing. That is the paintbrush. Unfolding over 70 years and through a chorus of unforgettable voices that move back and forth in time, Memphis paints an incredible, indelible portrait of inheritance, celebrating the full complexity of what we pass down in a family and as in a country. Brutality and justice, faith and forgiveness, sacrifice and love. Memphis has it all. Next up, When We Were Birds by, Ayana Lloyd Benwo, a mythical love story set in Trinidad and Tobago. Anyana Boyd Benyo's radiant debut introduces two unforgettable outsiders brought together by their connection with the dead. You were never the smartest child, but even you should know that when a dead woman offers you a cigarette, the polite thing to do would be to take it. So the novel begins, especially when that dead woman is your mother. This is a radiant novel of where the past it collides with the present, and a mythic love story. The writing is both atmospheric and light, heartbreaking and heartwarming. This is a story about inheritance, loss, and of love's healing powers. The Department of Rare Books and Special Collections by Eva Jursuk, coming again in January by Poison Pen Press. With its countless revelations about the dusty realms of rare books, a likable librarian sleuth who has just the right balance of compassion and wit, and a library setting that is teeming with secrets, the Department of Rare Books and Special Collections is a rare treat for readers. I love this book, Matthew Sullivan says, author of The Midnight at the Bright Ideas bookstore. Anxious People meets the delights of bookish fiction in a stunning debut following a librarian whose quiet life is turned upside down when a priceless manuscript goes missing. Soon she has to ask, what holds more secrets in this library? The ancient books shelved in the stacks, or the people who preserve them? Lies. Weiss long ago learned to be content working behind the scenes in this distinguished rare book department of a large university and managing the details and workings behind the scenes to make the head of the department look good. But when her boss has a stroke and she's left to run things, she discovers that the library's most prized manuscript goes missing. Liesel tries to sound the alarm and informs the police about the missing priceless book, but is told repeatedly just to keep quiet and to keep the doors open and the donors happy. But then a librarian unexpectedly stops showing up to work, and Liesel must investigate both these disappearances, unspooling her colleagues' past like threads of a rare bookbinding as it becomes clear that someone in this department is responsible for the theft. What Liesel discovers about the dusty manuscripts she has been working on for so long, and about the people who care and revere them, shakes the very foundation on which she has built her life. The Department of Rare Books and Special Collections is perfect for the book club read and is also available in trade paperback at $14.99. This makes the perfect book for everyone looking for something both literary and suspenseful. Vladimir, a novel by Julia May Jones, coming out in February. Last of our debuts, we have a very provocative, razor-sharp, and timely debut novel about a beloved English professor facing a slew of accusations against her professor husband by former students, and a situation that becomes more complicated when she herself develops an obsession of her own. A popular English professor whose charismatic husband is at the center of a small liberal arts college, is now under investigation for his inappropriate relationships with former students, and is the narrator of this much buzzed about debut. The couple have long had a mutual understanding when it came to their extramarital pursuits, but with new allegations, life has become far less comfortable for both of them now. But when our narrator becomes increasingly infatuated with Vladimir, a celebrated married young novelist who just arrived on campus, their tinderbox world comes dangerously close to exploding. With this bold, edgy debut, author Julia May Jones takes us into the charged territory where the boundaries of morality go up against the impulses of the human heart. This is darkly funny. Vladimir captures the personal and political minefield of a current moment in time and exposes the nuances and the gray area between power and desire. This is truly one of the most talked about debuts, both internally here at Baker and Taylor and externally among many of my colleagues who sell us books from various publishing houses. The arc itself has been talked about at length and has been passed around from publishing house to publishing house between the reps themselves as the buzz on this particular book grows and grows as it reaches its debut in February. Last up here, we have nonfiction. I'd like to take a look at some noteworthy nonfiction books out for spring 2022, and I'll touch on each briefly. First up, for all you James Patterson fans, we have James Patterson on James Patterson. This is an autobiography from the author and gives us his life story. This comes out in June and should be a huge circulation and seller. Lessons from the Edge by Mary Yankonovich is the former Ukrainian ambassador telling all of her time spent in diplomatic service, as well as her very abrupt tenure resignation by the former administration of this country. This comes out in March. The 90s, a book, is Chuck Klosterman's The Psychologist's foray into the 90s as a decade and all its idiosyncrasies, all its history, and all the nuances that made the 90s one of the most memorable decades of the 20th century, coming out in February. Next up, we have David Sedaris giving us a next humor essay collection in Happy Go Lucky. This comes out in May. After that, Sandy Hook, How an American Tragedy Became a Battle for Truth by Elizabeth Williamson. This is about the group of parents who fought for the truth of what happened to their children, and they fought a crusade against social media denial and conspiracy theories that still ring today on social media. This comes out in in March rather, 2022. How to Raise an Anti-Racist by Abram X. Kendi. This is how to raise the next generation of anti-racist thinkers. His last books have been huge sellers, and this particular book will also circulate quite well, coming out in June. The Power of Regret, How Looking Backward Moves Us Forward by Daniel H. Pink, is the best-selling author of When and Drive. This comes out in February. For the history buffs out there, we have two. The Mosquito Bowl, a game of life and death in World War II. A very interesting story by Buzz Binzinger, who wrote a book about a battle in the South Pacific and all of the sports recruits that were taken away from their various sports during World War II and actually fought in a bowl game of football somewhere in the South Pacific. This is their story. Against All Odds, a true story of ultimate courage and survival in World War II by Alex Kershaw, is the story of the Medal of Honor recipients throughout all of World War II. And lastly, we have from Norton Press, The Bald Eagle, An Improbable Journey of America's Bird, from the Pulitzer Prize-winning author Jack E. Davis. This is a cultural and natural history of the bald eagle and our national symbol. This comes out in March. I'd just like to bring up one last slide of all the services and things that we offer here at Baker and Taylor and through the children and teen services here. And as always, I would like to thank you very much for listening in to us today for our Title Talk Adult Winter Spring 2022. I'm Ray Paskiewicz. Thank you very much for listening. Happy reading.